Okay, I'm alive. Welcome back.
Yes, I believe this is episode 8.
Yeah, I had to count, but yeah, we're up to episode 8. I'm going to have to count every week because I'm just so freaking old.
And would you like to introduce the topic this week?
Okay, so this one's actually a bit off centre than what we usually do, but you'll see where it's coming from. So we sort of want to cover a couple of different things, but they're merged together, of girls attacking girls. I'm not talking about physically, I'm talking about their looks, their weight, their makeup, their whatever. We're always constantly picking on each other. I do it. I'm guilty of it. I've had it done to me. We get it done on a daily basis. But within that, we're going to talk about the difference between like men and women specifically. But that was just my thought of the day. So we're going to keep it nice and light and hopefully just have a short, quick, how do you go show tonight.
Exactly. So I guess the real question is where to begin with a topic like that, because I can think of sort of various aspects of that, of the
well,
go on.
I think with me, it as we always do, we talk before the show. And on the weekend, I went and bought a couple of outfits because I was going out on the Sunday and it was going to be warm and going through menopause. Anything above 15 degrees is a hot flash. And I saw this dress, and it was like a Mormon dress. Like I couldn't think of anything else. I actually ordered the Mormon dress, and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm not wearing that. That is a Mormon dress." But there's people that would wear it and be comfortable in it and love it. And who am I to judge who wears this? But I was like, I'm not wearing that. That's below me.
And by a Mormon dress, you mean like ankle deep sort of thing? The ankles.
I'm even doing it now. It was it was right down to the ground. I've got my own dresses like that. I've got maxi dresses and everything. I actually did buy a dress that it's extremely long and goes to my ankles, but not to my ankles. I'm nearly 6 foot tall, so I'm not the average height. But this was like that that idealism of the Mormon pattern and the high collar and the tiny bit of frill and everything on it. It was the stereotypical what you see on TV portrayed as a Mormon dress.
Yep.
So I don't mean to say that putting it down. It was just the best way to describe it. But I did put it down at the time by just judging the dress. So if I'm judging the dress, I'm judging the people that buy the dress.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was below me.
In actual fact, it sounds like from the description the type of dress you would see on, say, the compounds with the groups that have actually split off the main Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they're in compounds on the side, they've got polygamy. That sounds like what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. But it just, it was these different things, and you always see these fights on Facebook, and I constantly argue with feminists, and I'll pick on feminists for this one, about, and I don't care whether they're women, is they're like, we've been fighting for 100 years for you to have the freedom you've got now, and you know, you've got to keep on fighting for more freedoms. And it's like, yeah, great, thank you. But we've got to do it your way, because the second a woman wants to live in the stereotypical nuclear atomic lifestyle and be the at-home mum, and the man go out and make a living, and you know, she makes breakfast each morning and makes her husband lunch and keeps the house clean and all that, they're attacked. And I've seen it on the morning shows where it's like, it's a misogynist lifestyle, and it's like, no, she's chosen this. This is what makes her happy.
So feminists
will down for it.
feminists will always talk about women's choices, but women have to make the right choices.
They have to make the feminist choices, and I'm public enemy number one, as well as other women who believe the way I believe, because we're not fighting for their causes. Now, James and I had a great conversation on the weekend, and it was how it doesn't matter what I say or do, I'm always going to be the enemy because I don't agree with what they're doing. But as I said, I believe in women's fighting for women's issues, not feminists. I believe in fighting for women's rights, not feminism. I believe in fighting for men's rights. I believe in fighting. Now, I think there's a difference, just like there is a difference between women's rights and women's issues to feminism, men's issues, men's rights, and the way MRAs are portrayed by the feminists.
Oh, absolutely.
If we can all agree there is the extreme on either end.
I always point out that the question you should ask, every movement has extremists. The question you should ask is, what does that movement do with them? Now, look at the most prominent feminists. They're typically the ones with the most vitriolic speech. Look at extremists who are potentially involved in men's rights. They're to the side, typically right out of the movement, actually. But they're certainly not given leadership positions. And depending on how extreme they are, of course, the further out they go, I guess. But in feminism, you look at the most prominent feminists, and they are the ones with the most vitriolic speech. So I think that really says a lot about the two movements.
Not mentioning any names, time forward.
So getting back to, you were talking about, sort of feminists expecting women to make the right choices. One that I've personally observed, and I've seen this many, many times, is what happens when a woman has a child, and it's all the feminists start pressuring the woman to go back to work as soon as possible, which is really interesting, rather than say, look after their own child. So my view is, I actually don't mind whether it's a mother or a father that looks after the child, but I really think a child, if possible, if it's financially feasible, it's great if they can be with one of their own parents. But yes, I've seen that many, many times where they pressure the women into going back to work as quickly as possible, because somehow work is a far more worthy goal.
I think the far more worthy goal is live your own life, regardless of what the outside world thinks. If you want to, and if you have the physical ability to do it, if you have a child today, and 2 weeks later you want to go back to work, more power to you. If you have a child today, and 10 years later you want to go back to work, more power to you. Do what's right for you and the lifestyle you want to bring your child up in. No one's to judge. I won't judge you if you go back to work after 2 weeks, and I'm not going to judge you if you go back to work after 10 years. You do what's right for you and the lifestyle you want for your child.
Yeah, I agree. I'm certainly not going to judge people. I have a preference on that. It's just my preference is because I think the data shows that kids do very well with their parents. But yes, I'm certainly not going to judge anybody, and you really can't, because not everybody can do it. There are actually people who want to do it and financially can't. So I mean, that's when you start to get to situations like France, where they have extremely heavily subsidised childcare, and that, of course, changes the economic incentive. My concern there is that there may be women who would prefer to stay at home, and maybe husbands as well who prefer their wives to stay at home. But economically, it may be very difficult for them to argue with the wife going back to work, because I've heard of figures like $1 a day for childcare in France.
There was, I was fortunate when Brock was young and at daycare age that I lived in Melbourne and just north of Coffs Harbour. In Melbourne, after like a week of daycare, it was like over $200.
Yeah, here in Australia.
Yeah. Just north of Coffs Harbour, it was $1 a day. No, it's
Oh, really?
now, yeah, my son's now 22. That's obviously extremely long time ago. Things could have changed. So this is back in the early 2000s. Things have obviously changed because I hear of people complaining about the prices of daycare all over Australia. And it's like, why is this so expensive?
Yeah. I've never heard of heavily subsidised daycare in Australia like that. Was that subsidised by a
No,
council?
there was a couple of, we are talking 20 minutes north of Coffs Harbour, tiny small country communities. You couldn't even call them towns because there wasn't any, there was like a milk bar maybe, and one petrol station on the highway between Coffs Harbour and Grafton.
Classic
But
Australian.
yeah, but it was, yeah, I used to, by the time I got paid, it was no, it didn't, I didn't worry about paying the bill type of thing.
Amazing.
And they used to come and pick them up because it was in a remote community.
Yes, you were talking about fashion and how women view other women's fashion.
Well, so this is, I'm going to say this and let the cat out of the bag. Women wear makeup for other women. Because all the guys I know, and I'm just so popular, I know all the men. But all the men I do know haven't given a crap about makeup on women.
Yeah.
They don't care whether your nails are 10 inches long. They don't give a shit if your roots are growing out and you've got 3 inches worth of greys. Men usually, after getting to know someone, usually do just see the person.
Yeah, I tend to agree. If a man's going to find a woman attractive, he's going to find her attractive even if she's not wearing makeup. So it doesn't really matter to most men, I suspect.
Now, so we think about women's fashion, let's say the last 100 years, but I will touch base on something that was longer than that, but so from the flapper dresses to today. So we're talking about, it went from ankle length skirts, where, oh my God, she's showing her ankles, to skirts where you can see the hoo-ha. Maybe the cleavages were on show a little bit more, but now it's like you can see everything, including the nipples, through the clothes. I am judging it, but I'm a bitch. But not judging it in a way if that's what you want to do, fine. I just don't want it in my face. But men's fashion, and you were actually saying earlier, and it dawned on me, is more practical, where women's fashion is more fashion.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I guess I had noticed this for a while, but I was watching a video on an organisation called the Bruderhof, and this topic came up. So, just quickly, the Bruderhof is a Christian commune. It's one organisation based all around the world. The people there don't get paid for their work. They work sort of 6 or 8 hours a day or whatever. They don't get paid. However, they have all their needs provided for them. The Bruderhof itself sends people off to medical school and dental school and so forth, and then those people are placed where they're needed. But anyway, one young woman is running a series of YouTube videos about the Bruderhof, and one question that came up was, why were women's clothes so essentially encumbering, basically like you're referring to as the Mormon clothes, and the men's clothes look completely normal on the Bruderhof? And her response was that essentially the men's clothes are practical clothes. Both the men's and women's clothes are essentially practical clothes for what they're doing, but most men are already wearing practical clothes. And as a result, the men on the Bruderhof don't seem to be wearing anything particularly unusual. Women, in comparison, it's quite different. And their clothes are sort of conservative, but nevertheless, the clothes are meant to be practical from the materials and so forth. And so the women's clothes really stand out, and the men's clothes don't.
Yeah.
And it's the utility.
But you look even with a suit, like something as simple as a suit. It's still a suit. You know, the cut might have changed.
Mm.
It's still a suit. There's very, very little differences except for the 1980s double breast suits. You know,
Well, there's no accounting for the 1980s.
no. 1980s had an amazing music,
Terrible
amazing
fashion.
movies. We'll just leave the fashion for both men and women at the door. Although the 90s have got some explaining to do too. But if you look at, God, this can sound stupid, but if you look at the Oscars, like the ceremony, just look at the men's suits over the last 50 years. It's still a tuxedo. The suit's still basically the same. The material might have changed, the lapels might have got a bit bigger or a bit smaller, but it's still a tuxedo. And essentially, if they were all in black and white, you couldn't tell the difference. You do the same for the women, it's completely different. Now, you men don't give a crap. If we turn up in a flapper dress to a rockabilly skirt to hippie long whatever the hell that was, let's not leave out the 70s from it, insults and fashion, to the 80s power suit, to the fluoro colors, or they weren't fluoro, they're just really bright in the 90s, to whatever the hell they're wearing now. The ones that stay classic, or the ones that always get compliment, are the ones that stayed classic in the, so they go back to the Art Nouveau and the Art Deco. The ones that actually get trashed by all the fashion elite are the ones that have bucked tradition.
Right.
And that's where I think we attack women more than men. And women do it. Women are guilty of this. I'm guilty of it. I'll sit there and I'll judge whoever the hell I like.
That's for their clothes.
Well, yeah, but I do our own personality, and and I won't go into details, but I've had a problem with a certain female of the last couple of months, and it's sort of like, I don't know, I've got to stick up my butt when it comes to her, but it's been her actions that has made me put the stick up my butt, for lack of a better term.
Excuse me, I'm just going to block the camera for 1 sec. I'm not 100%. I'm just going to block the camera while I blow my nose.
I'll keep on talking. You
go, exactly.
You just do what you have to do. I won't. And I felt it. Is she jealous? Have I said something to piss her off? Have I done? What is it for her to treat me the way she has? And but it's this constant of butting heads where guys are like, and I could be wrong, either they like you or they don't like you. There's no fakeness in it.
Yeah, I think in general that's true. If a man doesn't like another man, I think he's going to know it. Yeah.
Yeah. But women are like, oh, hi, doll, how are you? Yeah, lovely. And then turn around and go, she's a fucking bitch. That's what we're like. We're all, I'm certainly guilty of it. We all do it. but I think it does need to be talked about, because women can't keep on playing the victim when we keep on tearing each other down. And I mean, from the feminists to somebody like me and everybody in between, we've got to stop playing the victim.
Absolutely. And
sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say perhaps it's easy. You've got this constant broadcast from the mass media and even the government now, sort of pushing this victimhood on women, and I wonder to what extent it's very easy to buy into that. Perhaps they even see short-term advantages, but I think in the long term, it's ultimately a serious disadvantage to go down that road.
But the feminists are the worst at doing that, especially on media, when they say stuff like, "You're a powerhouse, you're a woman, hear yourself roar, blah, 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 but you're also a victim. Play your victim card." It's like, no, sorry, I'm not a victim. I'm a strong, independent female. Like everybody else, I have been through hell.
Feminism isn't known for internal consistency.
Yeah, but it's been my personal hell, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I'm sure you've been through hell, and you wouldn't wish what you've been through on anyone. And whoever's watching this, I'm sure they've been through hell and wouldn't wish it on anyone. We've all been through hell. So we've all got some type of victim card to play. Don't play the victim card if you're no longer the victim. It's I've always said, you're a victim once, you play the victim continuously. So
yeah.
If I get hit by a car, I'm the victim there that got hit by the car. But if I turn around 10 years later and go, "Oh yeah, but 10 years ago I got hit by the car," that's me playing the victim card.
Yeah. I do sometimes think perhaps there's even a maturity aspect there too. It is something kids tend to do. Kids tend to sort of try playing the victim card, but I think they can be excused a lot because they're kids.
Yeah.
Something bad may happen, and they may try to, or they perceive it as bad, and they may try to use that to get sympathy in different situations. But yes, as adults, I think we can try adulting, and
just give it a try. Just put it on like a fashion dress.
Yep.
Just try this adulting thing for once.
Yes,
but
exactly.
I can't. I've got to think of the right words, because there's certain people that if anyone who's watching knows that I'm talking about them.
I want to choose your words carefully.
Yeah. This is gonna go on like, funniest home videos of me not be able to get my words out, but I know a certain person who was physically abused by their ex-partner. Or they say they were physically abused. But this person treats every male like that. And they talk about them chatting them up in a bar. And the way they react is as if that person's going to beat them up. That's playing the victim card, because it's happened. You're physically healed. You're obviously not mentally healed because of your reaction, but part of your healment to get over that is stop playing the victim card.
Yeah, that will ultimately hold them back if they're whether or not they're trying to get into another relationship or not. Being that hostile to people on the basis of their gender will ultimately hold them back.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And they say they say flippant male derogatory comments all the time. Now, the difference between me and the average person is I've got the ear for it. I pick up when people say it, because of this. Where other people they'll just hear it and it's just another flipping comment. But to me, it's like, no, that's a sexist comment
Mm. Mm.
because I, I know what to listen for.
You know, of course, that feminists will argue that it isn't sexist. Did you know that? Even a misandric comment, because of the inherent power structure you see in patriarchy. So they argue that you can't be sexist to a male because males have inherent power as a result of patriarchy. So you can be rude to them, they'll say, but you can't be sexist.
But that also, but that's what we're trying to fight against. It's like you can't you, you, you oh my god, I'm losing brain cells. You can't seriously think that that's right. And if
They
you
do.
think,
They genuinely believe it. They genuinely believe it.
then you're not fighting for equality. You are definitely fighting
Mm.
to overpower men and become the high agenda. It's not about I'm an equalist.
Mm.
That's what I call myself. As much as I say, you know, when we're talking about people and we're describing them, the first thing we notice, A, is the fact they're human. Second is their gender. So chuck all those tickets on. But when it comes to how I treat people,
Mm.
I don't care if you've got a dingling between your legs or you've got a vajayjay or how you identify yourself. I'm going to treat you all as equal.
Exactly, and that's the way it should be. And that's actually, ironically, what I think many in the left would have said decades ago. But now that's exactly like I consider myself a classical liberal, and that's I think a fairly straightforward classical liberal position to just be fair and reasonable with people, believe in the rule of law and equality before the law, and so forth. But the people who would have said that in the past are no longer saying it now, and there's this all this buy into identity politics, which starts to be inherently exclusionary, even as it uses the language of inclusion.
If I if I don't like somebody because of their race, as a female, I'm still racist. But if I this is where I don't understand. If I comment on somebody's race or someone's sexual orientation,
You mean like a negative comment?
yeah, I'm a bigot.
Hmm.
But if I say something derogatory because you're a white male,
Hmm. That's
that's
okay. Hmm. In fact,
then then that doesn't make sense because that's the stupidest thing I've ever friggin' heard. And trust me, I hear stupid things every day.
it's partly because of what I was saying about how they believe in the inherent power differential, and that's used as an excuse for a lot of the prejudice that they demonstrate. They argue that you can't be sexist. They also argue, although it's sort of outside the scope of what we're talking about, they also argue you can't be racist against white people for the same reason, because of the inherent power differential. But the problem, one of the flaws with that argument is that, of course, that doesn't mean that any particular individual. They argue that the individual always benefits from it, but I think that's a fairly thin argument in a lot of cases. I always make the point. I'm a white man. I happen to be a citizen of two very wealthy countries. I think I'm quite fortunate in that regard. But a peasant in the Ukraine would also be a white man, and I think his experiences and mine would be very different. And he certainly would not have the privileges that I have. So I think it has a lot more to do with nationality and various other factors, the wealth of your parents and so forth, than it does to do with things like gender and race.
Don't you get don't you get annoyed at people? It's the same as the victim card to me. People playing the privilege card. Like,
Mm.
oh, aren't you privileged? It's like, as you said, so a pauper in the Ukraine, and I've probably used that word so incorrectly. I'm sorry. Um, is obviously going through a different hell than what you would have ever
Mm.
faced.
Absolutely, absolutely. especially in the case of Ukraine, where in the last few years there's been conflict with Russia and low-level conflict in parts of Ukraine and all sorts of things.
Exactly. But if I told this Ukraine person what I've been through, they're going to feel sorry for me. And I've got a big, beautiful house. I live by myself. I've got my own job. I pay my own bills. I've got savings in the bank. Not a lot of savings, so don't come and rob me, but I've got savings in the bank. I've got my own privilege. Everybody's got a privilege because not everybody's got the same problems that you do.
Citizenship is a real privilege in the modern world, in all honesty, in a way that it hasn't, I don't think it's perhaps ever been before, maybe not since Roman citizenship anyway. If you have a Western passport, that is a huge advantage in life. And you can travel virtually anywhere. There's a reasonable prospect that the immigration officials won't give you any problem when you're entering a country. If you know people who have got passports that aren't as free, you can see a very different situation. So I think I would say nationality or citizenship is a genuine privilege these days, rather than.
It doesn't have anything to do with skin color.
What was that? Sorry.
That's got nothing to do with skin color or
Exactly.
or bank balance or anything.
That's right, exactly. In fact, even to a large degree, the Western countries, even to a large degree, tend to stick together. What are called the Kansa countries, Canada, New Zealand, UK, and Australia. They're always, I don't know if other people notice, but they are always helping each other out. And if you're a citizen of one Kansa country and you can't get help from your government, one of the other Kansa countries will probably help you out. There are these sort of low-level arrangements going on. And that's all around citizenship, and it's got nothing to do with ethnicity and so forth. And that's a genuine privilege, and yet you almost never hear anyone talk about
that. But okay, so we do want to keep it short tonight, so we'll go for we won't go longer than for another 15 minutes.
We're both a bit unwell, I think.
Yeah. One thing. And God, I feel bad. The feminists keep on doing this, as they keep on fighting for feminism in our countries. But I've got all the freedom in the world. I can wear whatever friggin' I want to wear. I can, whatever job I want to do, I can do now. I can marry whoever I want to marry, male, female, non-binary, transgender, whatever. I can do what I want to do. I can buy my own home. I can buy my own car and all that. There are countries out there, and not necessarily third world countries. There are very rich countries out there where it was only until 2017, and I forget the name of the country, where women weren't allowed to drive cars. It stopped in
that'd be Saudi Arabia. That'd be Saudi Arabia.
But it stopped in 1990.
Yeah. So Saudi Arabia is kind of going through a period of liberalisation at the moment, and part of that is normalisation with Israel and all sorts of things, and part of it has come out of that. Yes, is that women are allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia now for the first time, as you say.
Imagine that. I don't physically drive, but imagine not being able to drive. There's women who are still sold into marriages. Why aren't we fighting? There are countries where women are treated less. Why aren't these feminists going out fighting these countries?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And in actual fact, feminists, if you really look at it, spend very, very little time looking at the problems particularly in the developing world. Now, one that I wrote about a few years ago, it's a problem called obstetric fistulas. I don't know if you've heard of that. I don't know if you've ever read that article, but it was a few years ago. Anyway, basically, it's a problem that occurs as a result of birth. Now, in the developed world, it's basically a non-issue. It's a tear in the vagina that either gets into the bowel or into the bladder. Now, the problem is it doesn't heal on its own. It must be corrected. Now, what's really interesting about this operation is that the operation itself is actually very straightforward and very cheap. In fact, I found a price of about $400 in Ethiopia, for example, to do this procedure. But in the developed world, it's a non-issue. As soon as it occurs, if it occurs during birth, the doctors just immediately correct it. Have you ever heard them say, oh, she had some corrective surgery afterwards, might have been obstetric fistula or something like that. So it's a non-issue. In the developing world, it's very, very widespread. As I said, it's very cheap to fix. So you'd think it would be something that feminists would focus on. So I went to the website for the National Organization for Women, which is the largest feminist organization in the US, and I typed in fistula into their website search to find out what they were saying about it. I found exactly 3 references on their website. They're doing nothing about it, despite the fact that it's very, very easy to address and it would make a meaningful difference in women's lives. One was a woman who stood up at a conference who basically said we should be doing something about obstetric fistulas, and nobody cared. They moved on. And the other couple related to a congresswoman in the US who's trying to get the law passed, so US law changed so that the US government can donate to support women who need this procedure done. And again, National Organization for Women just aren't interested. So interestingly enough, though, there's a clinic called the Hamlin Fistula Clinic in Ethiopia that's been operating for about 60 years. And that was actually started by a New Zealand and Australian couple who were doctors. And they've actually been said they basically went for 3 years and stayed for the rest of their lives, and were addressing this problem with the local women. But this is I particularly pick up this one because it's a very easy problem to fix. It's cheap, easy, and yet feminists just aren't mentioned. They're not even mentioning it, let alone actually doing anything about it. What they should be doing, in my view, is fundraising for these organizations. And then imagine that every $400, your US $400, it actually fixes a person's life up. And without...
Sounds so basic. Why is it
Yep.
Why is it to us and not to them?
It's completely debilitating until they get fixed. I mean, these women are housebound until it's fixed.
But why, if it's easy for us to understand, if it's easy, and I don't mean this in a bad way, if it's easy for you as a white male, as they so likely politely put it, a white cisgender straight male, let's put it all together. If it's easy for you to understand, why is it so hard for feminists to understand that if you're going to fight against patriarchy, go to where patriarchy is?
When I wrote my article on A Voice for Men, many of the readers of A Voice for Men, that was about 2015, I think, were absolutely shocked at this. Even people who have, many of the readers of A Voice for Men have a pretty low opinion of feminism, right? Many of them were still absolutely appalled that feminists aren't doing anything about this. And honest to God, several of the contributors started donating.
So the patriarchal male,
readers of A Voice for Men,
that I'm going to assume are, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a majority of them would be male, cisgender, straight, and white.
Yes. Well, actually, interestingly enough, A Voice for Men seems to have a lot of female readers. At least the last time that an examination was done, the data came back that it was pretty much a mirror. They were able to examine US readers, not world readers, and US readers were actually pretty much a slice of the US society. It was about 50% male, 50% female. The proportions ethnicity-wise were fairly across the board, so fairly consistent with the national average. Yeah,
because we're starting to wake up.
Yeah, but it was the guys. You can even find the article and see the comments, and there were guys there who were saying, "Look, I'm going to start donating to this because I'm just so shocked that nobody's doing anything about this."
There's the World Wildlife Foundation is. I'm not putting them down. Keep on donating. They need the money, but the World Wildlife Foundation is worldwide. Why aren't we doing something? Why isn't something getting done like that for this?
Well, I can't say, of course, for any specific feminist, but to feminism to a large degree, concerns itself primarily with the problems, as they perceive them, of wealthy white women. That's the reality. And because some black woman in Ethiopia doesn't qualify for that, she doesn't get a lot of airtime out of. Oh, by the way, when I've mentioned this to feminists, okay, they will actually say that feminist organisations are supporting women in these countries with these sort of things, and to which I will say, well, which feminist organisations? Most of them won't answer. But when they do, they'll usually pick some international organisation and then that's say some UN department or something, and then call it a feminist organisation. So they'll just basically, claiming the work of others effectively. The reality is, feminist organisations like the Forces Society, the National Organisation for Women, and so forth, are not really interested in these sorts of things. What a world!
I know, and I actually find it amusing that,
In a perverse sort of
and
way.
I mean it in a positive light, that men are the ones trying to change the world for women in third world countries.
Yeah.
I've
Well,
got a
to be
friend that
honest,
I
I
love.
suspect that's no, go on.
I've got a friend of mine that I love very, very dearly, and I won't mention his name here, but in a third world country, and if he's listening to this, he can correct me if I'm wrong. He's actually opened up a school. He's a chef. He's a famous chef in Asia, and he's opened up a school in a Asian third world country, which teaches women how to cook. So it's giving them a skill set.
Yep.
Now, he is doing more for women in a third world country than I bet any feminist or
to a large degree, men always will. And I keep making this point when they talk about the things like the curfew that we were talking about, 6 p.m. curfew for men and so forth. The reality is, men are far more likely to help a woman in distress than they ever are to hurt a woman. Most men would really go against the grain to harm a woman. So if you remove men from the equation, women don't become safer; they become less safe, because the people who are inclined, if you look at say a flash flood or something like that, next time there's a video of a flash flood, plenty of videos of other disasters, have a look who's in the water or who's scaled down the cliff. It's a man, and it's going to be a man, irrespective of whether it's a man or a woman who's in danger. And so, if you remove men from the equation, women are going to become less safe.
it's I can't think of words tonight. What's wrong with me?
We're both a bit under the weather.
I find it very disheartening and I mean this with all due respect, there's women heroes out there. And there could be, and a lot of heroes aren't necessarily scaling down mountains to say, aren't saving lives, are actually just standing up and speaking out.
Mm-hmm. Yep, fair point.
Or the authors, or the poets, or the singers, and they touch a chord with somebody, and they, you've seen it on video, you've seen it on YouTube and all that, where you'll be at you'll see a concert and somebody will bring a sick child up on stage or something. To them, at that moment, they're a hero, male or female. But when it comes to life-saving heroism, when it comes to a stranger, a majority of the time it is a male.
Yeah, I just say, look at next time you see a video, and let's face it, these things are recorded virtually all the time now. You have a look and see who's putting their life at risk. Now, one thing that's interesting, I think the New York City Fire Department is, I think, about 15% female or something like that. Several years ago, I found a website of all of the firefighters who had died in the World Trade Center, and I went through every single photo and looked at them. Every single one was a man. Every single one. So I don't know how that works in terms of arrangement of duties and so forth. I just find it interesting that all the ones who were in the building were men. There were about 300 of them or something like that. I went through every single photo. This is several years ago. Everywhere you look, everywhere you look. So is that toxic masculinity too? By the way, try to find a definition of toxic masculinity too. It's actually really hard. One thing they will talk about is that stoicism, which is definitely a characteristic men are more likely to show. Stoicism, they will say, is part of it, but I would say stoicism can be negative or positive. It can cause people to achieve greatness, but it can also be self-destructive. But beyond that, try finding a definition of toxic masculinity. It's actually really hard. Feminists don't like to define things because that would allow you to nail them down.
But with our discussion last week on the curfew, I mentioned that there is a certain ethnic teen gang in the area where I live that just after New Year's Eve beat up a man in a park. It hit the news and everything. Now, this man was actually going to help a young woman who was getting attacked by this ethnic gang.
Right, yes.
And he's the one that nearly lost his life. Yep. It's happened a couple of times in Melbourne over the last 20 odd years that I know of, where a man's gone to the rescue of a woman and either been hurt himself or been murdered.
It's essentially the normal behaviour of most men to seek to particularly help a woman. They will do it to a man who's at risk too, to a certain extent, but they're far more likely to do it to try to help a woman. Interestingly enough, though, and this is something we've been sort of concerned about for a while in terms of how men are really seeing all the misandry in society. About a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, there was a woman who was accosted on the tube in London, and there were a couple of other guys in the compartment. It was a man who was accosting her. They got up and walked out, and that's essentially unknown. And I think we may actually see more of that in the future. But the fact that we saw that even once, I think, was really quite extraordinary, because that's virtually unknown for men to do that. They just didn't want to know about it, and apparently didn't even say anything, just walked out.
Yeah, but why did they want to know about it? Because you just pointed out the perfect example of the hypocrisy is if a man does do it, it's to do with patriarchy. If a man doesn't do it, it's to do with patriarchy. It's like...
That's right.
You can't win.
They structure their arguments so that... That's right. That's exactly right. They structure the argument so they always come out winning like that, rather than doing what we do, which is, I don't know, presenting data. And if anyone wants to have a look at the data, please go to Wiki for Men. We've got a huge amount of data there, as there are at other sites too. But yeah, there's lots of data we're presenting on our side, and the other side just seems to present a lot of opinion and outrageous claims. And if anyone wants to challenge me on that, I'd be happy to respond to that.
Please do, because even when I've given statistics, even when I've actually given the website, I've been like, I've still been torn down. It's like, they said, give me the proof. And they've literally said, and this is only the last couple of weeks, give me the proof and not the MRA statistics. And I was like, okay. Yeah. So I went to the Australian criminology statistics and just uploaded that. Didn't tell them where to go or anything. And they said, it took me 10 seconds and it already showed me the flaws in it. I said, if you don't know how to read it, that's fine, sweetheart. But that's where statistics are. And they were like, and they end up, it's no secret that I hate feminism. I put it out everywhere I go. But this woman actually was like, and there it is. As soon as I turned around and said that was such a feminist comment, just there's the MRA narrative. I was like, no, it's no secret I hate feminism.
You were being critical of the movement, exactly. I've
actually given you statistics. I've actually given you where you can find the statistics, and that's still not good enough for you.
Yep. And what you were doing was just openly criticising feminism, which is fine. We should be entitled to do that. In fact, and
Yeah.
I always say, and in my view, they're welcome to criticise us. I have no problem with that at all. What I often find, we'll respond to that. And to be very clear, that has always been my position. I want free speech, and I'm quite happy to be criticised, and I will respond to those criticisms, quite happy to do that. But the other side keeps trying to shut down criticism. They're not interested in responding.
I agree. I find there's times when I get to, when I hear certain Australian feminists speak, and again, not mentioning any names, God, that one's hard, that I find all I want to do is actually gag them so they'll listen. It's not that I want them to stop talking forever, just shut up long enough to listen.
Do you know something? They won't. And another point that's interesting is that you'll find that while we tend to read both sides of the argument, I spend a fairly considerable amount of time looking at feminist sides. They won't read our sides, and they say that it's hate speech or whatnot, which is a very convenient argument to prevent yourself having to be challenged. So they won't go to A Voice for Men, they won't go to Wiki for Men or anything like that, and they will stick there in their little echo chamber and then accuse us of being in an echo chamber. But we actually engage with people we don't agree with, read their sites, look at their sources. A proponent or a supporter of Our Watch, which is another feminist organisation here, sent me a video a little while ago. I watched the video. I was disappointed to see the video was completely content free, and I mean completely content free. It was just an opinion piece, and they actually thought this was evidence of what they were saying. But we're quite happy to look at it. But that's very one sided. So we look at both sides. We read the material regularly and comment on it. And you'll find they don't tend to look at our material at all. Most of them don't look at all at our stuff.
And before we go, I'm glad you brought that up. And we have mentioned this, I think it was on our first episode, is the statistics we get are from the Australian Bureau of Criminology, if I'm right.
And the Australian, that's right, the Australian Institute of Criminology. And the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and lots of other places as well. But yes, they're certainly for Australia, they're major sources of information.
We get them from actual government sites.
Yes, absolutely we do. And those will be, in the case, if you look at Wiki for Men, for example, if something is quoted there'll be a link to the original document, or the original, or a copy of the PDF may be saved. But that you should be able to trace all that back to the original documents. And by the way, the Partner Review State of Knowledge Survey, which is the largest meta-analysis of domestic and intimate partner violence ever, I know that's a bit of a mouthful. It studied there were about 12,000 studies reviewed, and about 1,700 included in the actual meta-analysis, I believe. You can actually go to that, and you can link right down to all the studies. And if you think that what they're saying is a little bit off, a little bit suspicious, you can actually go through and find the studies and read the studies yourself. So it's all there. By the way, the PASC, Partner Review State of Knowledge, found, not surprisingly, we would say, that domestic and intimate partner violence is not gendered. That was what they found. They also found a lot of other results. It's not just gender specific, by the way. PASC actually talks about a whole range of parameters, but they actually found that what they found in relation to gender was that, firstly, that it was not a gendered thing, and secondly, that a little bit over half was reciprocal, which is what all the other studies have found as well. And so, by the way, for those who don't know, because I've run across a few people who aren't really aware of this, I'm quite fortunate to have a background in science. A meta-analysis is essentially a review of a large number of studies with the intention of removing biases in the individual studies. So the results you get from a meta-analysis are far more valuable than you will find with individual studies, because individual studies have biases, and with meta-analysis, those will, to a large degree, even out.
That it's really good to know, because I think a lot of people have got to understand that, especially, and I'm going to point out White Ribbon on this one, and probably
our friends at White Ribbon Australia.
Yeah, that they work off the Duluth model, which is one study, that's actually since come out with the people who created it to say that it's
That's right. At
not
least one of
correct.
the originators has explicitly come out and said it's basically harmful. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so, but it's one source that Australian White Ribbon have always worked under, the Duluth model.
And the Duluth model argues that intimate partner violence is a result of patriarchal aggression and men seeking to control women. Were this true, intimate partner violence would virtually always be something men do to women. But the data with PASC and many other sources shows that that is not the case. I want to mention something too, actually. This is just a rumor I've heard, but I'm going to say it. So there's a study out in New Zealand called the Dunedin longitudinal study. So there's a town in your city in New Zealand called Dunedin, not to be confused, I believe, with a city in Scotland called Dunedin. Anyway, the study is a longitudinal study, which is another compelling sort of study. And that means that rather than, say, compare young people with old people in 2021, you start studying people very young, in this case at birth, and you keep studying them through their life. And they're up to the Dunedin participants. So there's a few hundred people in this, and they've been studied virtually their entire life. It's a completely voluntary process. Interestingly, they interview them every 5 years. The study participants are offered a return trip to Dunedin in New Zealand from anywhere in the world to participate in the study. The vast majority of them are in New Zealand or Australia, but there are a few that are widespread around the world. They'll fly them back from the UK to participate, and send them back home to the UK. Anyway, they have found the same thing. They found that intimate partner violence is not gendered, and they found that a higher proportion, a bit over half, is reciprocal, meaning that each partner is both a victim and an aggressor in intimate partner violence. That's what PASC shows. It's what everybody who's making a serious look at it finds. Okay. There's a rumor that this has upset people, and intimate partner violence is not going to be monitored by the Dunedin study going forward. So the coming years will tell us if this is true or not. But that's the rumor I've heard, that they're going to quietly drop it because it's found that intimate partner violence is not gendered.
But I'm sorry. Okay, we're running out of time here, but it is gendered. It's not gendered.
Not gendered. Yeah, every PASC shows that. The Dunedin study shows that. There are a bunch of other longitudinal studies. There was a longitudinal study on teenagers in the US. Same thing. It showed two things always come through. It's not gendered, and a little bit over half is reciprocal.
And then another little bit over half, it's especially when it comes to intimate violence, it's the female. I think it's like 51%.
Actually, it's a bit higher than that.
Victims a same-sex partner.
Yep. So PASC. Oh, sorry. I see what you're saying. Right. So PASC actually found that of intimate partner violence that was not reciprocal, about 2/3 was female on male.
Okay. And
so on average, women are actually committing it more often than men.
Okay. Thank you. And because of the other part of the study where the same sex couple, it's like 50.
That's right.
I could be wrong. It's about 51%.
In my understanding, the data has varied a little bit. Some, I think, have found no difference, but some studies have found a significantly higher rate among lesbians, and some studies have even found a lower rate among gay men.
Yeah, because I think, and this is going back a few years ago, I think it was like 10% of same-sex male couples, 10% of male victims of domestic violence, 10% of them were same-sex partners, where 51% were same-sex female partners.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Could be wrong, but that was.
I don't recall the figures offhand, but
4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, we are closing in on an hour.
Yeah. And so much for wanting to go for half an hour to 45 minutes. But we do what we do. I mean, we go off topic, but I think that's one of the things we love about doing this is that it's a real conversation.
Exactly. That's our thing.
As usual, as a normal conversation, it's going to go off topic.
Exactly. That's right. Exactly. And I think that's great. It's an interesting conversation.
But we will wrap it up. So before we say goodnight, do the click, like, subscribe, share, do the YouTube algorithm thingy for both me and Rob. And just all we're trying to do is start a discussion. I'm not going to change the world. We're just trying to start a discussion.
We can nudge in the right direction.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nat. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks again, Rob. You take care. I'll see you next week.
Bye. See you.
Bye.